Everybody, and welcome back to another fun tutorial. Today we are going to be showing off more of the Game Master products, especially our terrain primers. Today Thomas is in studio and he's going to make you a ruin for your fantasy tabletop. So Thomas is taking some graph paper and our steel ruler and just a graphite pencil, and he's making a stencil. And a stencil is really important when you're making these more intricate shapes on your XPS foam because it helps you to repeat these shapes throughout the process. So he's just adhered this very simply to the foam and he's tracing this pattern onto it. Using a steel ruler, he's going to measure and mark off the remaining pieces so that way he can finalize the scale of this wall that he's building, and then he's just going to begin cropping them off using his scenery knife. Now, using the hot wire foam cutter, he's very carefully going to cut out the doorway or archway that he traced on with the pattern stencil that he made using the graph paper. Be very careful here, use a steady hand, and take your time. With the piece cut, you're going to want to treat the foam using some of the sandpaper. This helps to soften the edges, it makes paint adhere to it, and also gives it a more natural texture. Now we're going to show you how to add a cobblestone or bricked texture to your terrain, especially using the XPS foam. We're just going to mark out the brick sizes like so with our steel ruler and a graphite pencil, and we're just going to score some lines. Now we're not cutting all the way through the foam here, we're just scoring them very lightly, and this is going to act as a guide later. Once you have all of the horizontal bricks cut and scored, we're going to go ahead and go in and we're going to add some different shapes and different size bricks vertically, just like Thomas is doing here. Now you can make these as small or as large as you'd like. You can randomize them a bit. What we like to do sometimes is even add some on an angle to make them a little bit more irregular and more natural looking. And once you have them all cut, just take your pencil and trace out those score marks. This adds a nice deep and realistic depth to the piece of foam. It really gives it a true brick appearance. Using an old brick or stone, go ahead and press it into the surface of the foam. This gives it a nice realistic brick or stone texture. A cool thing that you can do to add even more irregularities to the bricks is just take the corner of your steel ruler and find some random bricks on your archway here and just go ahead and press in the corners. This gives the appearance of depth and realistic dents and indiscrepancies in the bricklaying. Now, I hope you saved the inside pieces of the doorway because we are going to use them to fashion a door. Now Thomas is cutting some very thin panels here out of the remaining strips of XPS foam. You can see that they're very thin and very pliable, and we're going to use these to add some faux wood paneling. So very carefully, just take your hot wire foam cutter and go ahead and pull some very fine and very thin shapes. Then you just want to size them up a little bit, and you can use your pencil to just trace out and get the right angle, as you see Thomas doing here. And then you can very carefully cut them out using your scenery knife. To add a realistic wood grain texture, just go ahead and draw some irregular shapes on the wooden door here with your graphite pencil. It's a really simple and easy way to pull off that wood grain effect. Now go ahead and apply some glue to the panel here, and very simply adhere it on the door as you see fit. Now Thomas is going to begin building out the remaining walls to this archway, to this small building for your fantasy tabletop. You're going to go ahead and mark out your brick and cobblestone marks just like you did on the first piece, like so. You're going to score them, you're going to reinforce them with your pencil later on, and you're just going to cut them to fit the shape that you need them to be. Make sure you cut all four walls to the depth and width that you want them to be. Once you have everything cut to the dimensions that you want them to be, go ahead and glue them together to start building out the general structure of your building. And now you can finish this off by gluing on the rest of the remaining brick panels. Don't forget to glue on the roof to your building. And once the glue is set, it's time to head to a well-ventilated area. Give your can of terrain primer a really good shake and begin applying a nice, smooth, and even coat all over your terrain feature. Once you're finished applying the primer, go ahead and turn the can upside down, activate the nozzle until pigment stops emitting from the nozzle. This is a great way to keep it clean for future use. You can see that Thomas has made a base for his terrain feature. This is totally optional, but you can go ahead and create one very simply at home. We're going to begin painting in this terrain feature, and we are using a bit of dungeon base from the Game Master Dungeons and Caverns core set. Now we're applying an overbrush. We're using a dry brush, and we are applying a little bit heavier application of this paint, but still leaving some of that primer color, that Ruins and Cliffs terrain primer, in the recesses. We're going to move on to our next color, and for this we are using Dungeon Highlights, and we're going to apply this just very lightly over top. We're not going to cover up any of the dungeon base. We're just going to apply it in just a more gentle application than the first, focusing on the most extreme hard edges and upper areas. Now we're going to apply a highlight of skeleton bone, and we like using this bony color over top of grays because it gives it a very natural brick and concrete appearance. We're going to continue building up the layers. This time we're using one of the quick shade washes, and you're just going to apply this in a stippled fashion in random areas across the model, and you can see how it gives it a nice dingy, worn, and weathered appearance. In addition to the stippling effect, you can begin adding streaks with a smaller dry brush like Thomas is doing here, and this gives it almost watermarks and really helps to build up that weathered effect. The Army Painter has a host of different effects paints like Glistening Blood, like you see here, Dry Rust, and Disgusting Slime. These are great ways to add an even more advanced narrative to your terrain pieces. Thomas has applied some of the Glistening Blood to an old dry brush, and then using his finger, he's just going to splatter that across random areas on this piece of terrain to really give the look that a battle has happened here. When applying special effects like this to any piece of terrain, we always recommend that you start small, because you could always add more to the piece that you're working with. You can add more blood, you could add more rust or more slime, but it's much harder to take it away. So go ahead and start small, pick a few key areas like Thomas is doing here just on this corner, and work on that first, and then see if you want to apply more of it to the piece of terrain in later steps. Now Thomas is going to add some of our XPS foam glue or any of your Battlefield's basin glue. Any PVA glue will work. Now we're going to add this to our palette here, and then we're just going to apply this in a stippled fashion using an old brush to the base. We're going to begin adding flocks, some nice mossy and grassy effects to the base. So apply this where you think some grass or growth or moss would begin growing on your terrain feature, and then go ahead and grab some of your grass. We're using steppe grass here from the Army Painter Battlefields range, and we're just going to sprinkle this over top of the areas where we applied the basin glue like you see Thomas doing here. When you're finished, you can go ahead and remove any of the excess pieces of tuft and go ahead and save that for later for future projects. To add even more realistic foliage to your terrain pieces, go ahead and grab some Battlefield's tufts. Any tufts will do, any colors of tufts. We actually recommend using a couple different colors to really give it a realistic appearance. Using the tufts in combination with the flock is a really simple and easy way to give it a realistic appearance. Now we're going to begin to highlight up the doorway here. Now we've got a bit of Monster Brown and our Masterclass dry brushes. You could use any dry brush that you have. We do produce many different variations, but the Masterclass dry brush is great because it does have a dome-shaped rounded bristle head, which is great for working with these finer details such as the wood grain on the doors. Then we're going to apply a final highlight, this time using Troll Claws. This is a nice, a little bit more vibrant yellowish brown, and this gives a real natural wooden appearance when you use it in combination with the darker brown tones, the lighter Monster Brown tone, and now this yellowish brighter tone gives it a true wood grain effect. And now we're going to paint in the metal panels, and we are just going to use a bit of gun metal from the Army Painter Metallics Warpaints range. We're just going to apply a nice smooth coat of this metallic paint over cross of these metallic beams. We have a bit of our Subterrain wash here, and we're just going to apply this all over the door like so. You can see Thomas is applying it to the wood grain, allowing those deeper, darker pigments to work their way into the details of the wood grain. This is going to help add some realistic depth and shading all across the door. And now we're just using a bit of dark tone, and we're going to apply this over top of these metal panels. To give these metal panels a weathered and rusty effect, go ahead and water down some dry rust. This is an effects paint from the Army Painter Warpaints range, and you can see that Thomas has thinned this down with some clean water almost to a wash consistency. He's going to allow those bright orange pigments to work their way into the recesses of this metal column. Now we're going to take some of our XPS foam sculpting glue, and it's time to adhere the doors inside of the doorway of this giant scenery piece. This is a great centerpiece model for any gaming table, especially dungeon terrain or even a giant fantasy wargaming table. You can adhere the doors completely shut or just a bit open to add a nice murky feeling to the terrain feature. We hope that you enjoyed all of the tips and tricks found inside of this tutorial. More than anything, we hope that you noticed just how fun it can be to build your own terrain with the GameMaster range of products from the Army Painter. This versatile range of products is perfect for building anything from dungeon tiles to wargaming terrain. Whether it's historical gaming, science fiction, or fantasy, GameMaster has something for you. Check it out at thearmypainter.com.